Hey everyone, this is Module 3 for Class 853, an opportunity to interview an administrator, a special education teacher, and a paraprofessional in regards to special education teacher. I had an opportunity to actually visit with the principal within my building. He's the principal for our K-4 building, and then he's also the principal in the 5-6 building, which is about 4 miles away in another town, but he does both. I had a chance then to talk with a high school special education teacher since that's really not in my area most of the time during my professional day, but I wanted to kind of get a different perspective on special education, so I visited with a high school SPED teacher, and then I chose a paraprofessional who has worked in my classroom personally in the last couple of years with students, again, to see their perspective on how special education and administration works together for our students. I started off with the question about our tools and how we identify those. Our administrator came through and shared with me one of the screening papers that our co-op uses. We use 305. As a co-op, but they do this screener early on by the age of 3 that involves hearing, speaking, seeing, moving, and playing to maybe be proactive before these kiddos get into kindergarten with us, and we can see or identify some areas of concerns early on. Our high school special education teacher, as I visited with her, she was unaware of those early screeners, but the post screeners are things that we use once we've started the school year. She was very knowledgeable on. Most of the time that happens based on teacher recommendation and observation, and then they put these students on a student improvement team, a SIT team, where then evaluation happens, potentially evaluation happens, and modifications are made and interventions are given. Our paraprofessionals are not a part of this process. They weren't really aware not only of early interventions or early screeners, but not too aware of later on screeners. I enjoyed this question as I visited with all 3 of them, hearing their perspective on what's challenging in special education. My administrator went on to actually say, besides finding the balance of what's really best for our kids and our staff and the other kids in the rooms, finding that balance, he actually mentioned that at-risk kids are more challenging to deal with because they don't have that plan, they don't have that state support, and they are oftentimes very difficult plans to kids to work with and get support that they need. Special education's teacher of a challenging role was their supervision role. They went into teaching to teach, and they love working with these special education kiddos, but being in charge of adults and supervising them has proven to be a little difficult at times. Also, as well as finding the difference or recognizing that they, as the teacher, have a different view or a different plan for how their classroom should work and be managed in the administration. Kind of a conflicting view of opinions as well as roles in the classroom. The paraprofessional really felt that their challenge was lack of training. Our paraprofessionals come from 305, and there is training offered, but it's not enough, according to her. And then, of course, they struggled with the difference in the consistency of the IEP when it came to implementation. The para might have one plan because they're in the classroom with that child, and the special education teacher might have something different that they need to be in place of, and the administration had a different idea, and that didn't seem to be as consistent as it could, at least in our district. So a challenging role for them was being one of 4 parties trying to get what was best for our kiddos. Again, as we went through that interview, we talked about what was rewarding, and across the board, it was success. Seeing those kids either thrive or celebrate or make progress in an area that they haven't shown progress before was the number one thing that all 3 of my interviewees said was exciting for them and rewarding for them. My administrator went to go on and say that another thing that he really enjoyed as a part of special education was these new opportunities of co-teaching, where your special education teacher and your regular education education teacher were both up in front of the class teaching together, team teaching, verbally and physically and spatially in the same area at the same time. And he thought that was a very rewarding part of his job when those teachers get together and actually co-teach. As for advice, our paraprofessional said training and support. Those things are key when it comes to supervision. Special education teacher really talked about communication and support as well as follow-through. Sometimes that kind of gets lost as the role of our principal becomes spread or thin, that follow-through. And as for my administrator, he too really focused in on communication of all of those people, all of those little entities working together to find what was best for our special education kiddos. As that communication continued on into our next question, I don't see how it cannot not be the number one focus here too. When working with parents, you must communicate. You want to avoid unnecessary changes. To do that, you need to be a part of the IEP process. Letters, notes, updates, daily journals, checklists from my special education teacher's perspective were ways that they could keep their parents involved. As a side note, I think it's very important, not only do we communicate, but we listen in that communication piece, because sometimes we only hear what the law says, and we weigh too heavy on that side, or sometimes we only hear what the parent says, or the teacher says, or whatnot, but listening and finding a blend when dealing with all of those pieces. Of course, our paraprofessionals in our district don't communicate with parents. It is hard, being from a small town. Sometimes they'll try to catch you, the parents will try to catch you as a paraprofessional outside at a ball game or something, and you really have to just kind of, say, oh, yep, nope, please visit with the teacher or the administrator in a situation like that. How do they work with regular education teachers in the special needs area? The administrator provides us with an at-a-glance report at the beginning of the year. Again, it's communication. It's being supportive. The special education teacher works for co-teaching and modifying lessons, trying to make sure that their paras or their support staff are hands-on with the kiddos and not just working for the teacher. The paraprofessional really takes time to work with those teachers. They talk and they communicate before the kiddos come into the room, and make sure that they know the role or the expectation of the teacher. They come up with that classroom plan, because all of those people working together for that student needs to be cohesive. So advice for us administrators, anybody taking this class or those looking for a little tidbit. My principal said it's very important to be flexible in this area. You as a first-year administrator really need to be knowledgeable, but yet be flexible enough to understand that other people have more experience than you. Special education teacher focused in on making sure you listen to those teachers, but you also know the law and the policy. My paraprofessionals said you need to be knowledgeable about kids, you need to be supportive, and you totally have to be consistent. Consistency seems to be maybe an issue in our district, maybe not in everybody else's, but that consistency and that follow-through. So, the role of special education teacher and the principal together is to be aware, is to communicate, and provide and understand the different perspectives that are coming in. From the paraprofessional, you need to teach those skills and strategies. The role of the building principal and teacher needs to be of management, to be able to work together to provide support, ensure consistency, and follow those plans. While visiting with my special education teacher, they definitely wanted to hit in on some things that were very difficult or have been challenging in the past for us, that maybe our administration is a little more into micromanaging and following test scores over observations. And at times they are less supportive than they maybe need to be or should be, and it interferes with the progress that these kiddos are making and that these teachers can offer these kiddos. So the role definitely had some different views from each one of these entities as I interviewed them. So, what characteristics do they look for in regards to administrators in their involvement in special education? Again, my principal really talked about that flexibility, really talked about finding the best solution for the situation, and that it was very important that you were a trusting individual, trusting your SPED supervisors, those that had the knowledge because they work in it all the time, and so just part of the time like you. Special education teacher sent me this neat little poster, this insert that really talks about the difference between the boss and the leader and how important it was for them to be coaches, for them to give credit and to build strength within our building, within our special education program, and with our students. The paraprofessional, visiting with her and knowing what she's, like I said, been like in my classroom as a help, she thought it was very important that administrators like myself, or future administrators like myself, be an advocate for all of our kids, to make sure that I would provide training, have personal special education training on my own, and be proactive in any situation that was coming our way. That this opportunity was strengthening for me, as I got to visit from 3 different perspectives, 3 different areas involved in special education, and a chance for me to kind of see some things that maybe I hadn't heard before within our building and our district in regards to different perspectives, different roles, different views on roles, as well as the importance of communication with everybody. Thanks, guys.